So Leah, on the Facebook screen, it now says stars enabled.
Yay?
Yay? But it says 0 stars received. Must be something new Facebook's come up with. No, the Facebook screen is...
But it says April, we're still March.
Right. Not anymore.
Oh, no, it says... I don't know.
26 today.
I thought you said it was.
No, I said stars are enabled.
Oh, enabled.
Stars are enabled. So I can check into it.
Stars, it's my Wisconsin accent. Stars enabled. Good morning to everyone. On this last Sunday of Lent, we are in the 5th Sunday of Lent. If you look at your bulletins on your back page, what we are looking at least for the next week and a half, this Wednesday, the midweek Lenten service will be held at First Lutheran in Fort Wayne. Followed by next Sunday is our beloved tradition we're bringing back of the Palm Sunday Egg Bank, which has traditionally been a fundraiser for the youth group. So we will do that again this year, be a youth group fundraiser. And the sign-up sheet is in the back on the bulletin board out in the narthex. And it's just a lovely event for Palm Sunday. A bunch of delicious egg bakes and muffins and orange juice. And we are also bringing back this year the agape meal. We have a special dinner in the fellowship hall, and we eat foods reminiscent of the time when Jesus walked on this earth. So there's no coffee, there's no silverware, and it is figs and nuts and honey and bread, fruits and wine, and we eat with our fingers. And then we come in here to the sanctuary and strip the altar. It's a lovely event. We eat in the dark by candlelight. Wonderful event for Jesus' last meal. Good Friday schedule, just putting this out early, is that we are going to join with our Saviors in Iron River at 1 p.m. on Good Friday for their cantata. There is, I guess we should wait for Jan, the organist, to show up.
Yeah, your music is here now.
I noticed there was no prelude playing. Thank you, Jan. And again, that will be the cantata at 1 p.m. at Our Savior's Iron River, and there is no official Good Friday service here, but the church will be open on Good Friday from 7 to 8 p.m., and I will be here, I guess, sitting vigil on Good Friday here at the church for anybody who does want to come on Good Friday that evening. And Terry, our Township Johnson, our council president, has some announcements he would like to make.
There's a Eco Summit that's going to be held at Gloria Day Church in Duluth, and Pastor may have some more information. We didn't get a chance to really review it all, but basic concept of it is...
Use the speaker.
Good idea. Yeah, when was the last time somebody said that?
What's the basic concept?
We are joining Northwest Wisconsin Synod with Synod across the border there, and at Gloria Day, remember the church that burned, and it's a day-long event, 9:30 to 3:30, talking about issues about the environment and our ecosystem. And we as a supporting synod are invited to, for their hospitality hour from 3:30 to 4:30, is to help supply items for that hospitality hour and help be servers for whoever comes to this summit on our environment. I've got some flyers in the back I can bring out at Fellowship Hour.
In the end of April, we've got the Synod Assemblies meeting again, so if there's a couple of people that are interested in going kind of as delegates from the church, we would welcome that as well. And also just kind of get an idea to see if folks are interested in getting the men's group going back again here again. We haven't been doing that, so if you are, try to contact myself or maybe Gary or Dale, and we'll be trying to get something going. And the money for the egg bake again, we're hoping to put that money for the kids that are going to camp at Luther Park. So.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I invite you to join me in confession as found in your bulletin. Lent days are winding down, merciful God, and we are no closer to having contrite hearts.
Our small complaints still loom large, and we don't hurry to show mercy or rush to be kind.
The places where you make yourself known to us,
Where you wait in quiet for us to be ready, still feel you.
bring us fully into your Lenten gifts, we pray.
Accept the Lenten gifts we offer to you.
Amen. I invite you to sing our gathering song, Tree of Life and Awesome Mystery, hymn number 334. And as you look at that hymn, 334, we will sing verse 1, and then verses Lent 3, Lent 4, and Lent 5. Let us pray. The prayer of the day is found in your bulletins. Gracious God, your Son came into the world to free us from sin and death. Breathe upon us the power of your Spirit, that we may be raised to new life in Christ and serve you in righteousness all our days. Amen. For our gospel reading today, it is most of John 11. As like last week, it is a very lengthy reading, so I do invite you to find your lectionary Bibles in the pew, and we are on page 1254, the death of Lazarus. John chapter 11, page 1254. There you see all in purple. So not as much as last week, but I will be making a few comments as we read along. The Holy Gospel according to John, the 11th chapter. The death of Lazarus. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he who you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you are going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them." After saying this, Jesus told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." Thomas, who we normally call Doubting Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." The tension in Jerusalem right now is amping up. Jesus is very near to what we would call the beginning of Holy Week. Jesus, the resurrection and the life. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. And as Jan Stevens read this morning in her devotional, there is an understanding in the Jewish world that the spirit hovers with the body for 3 days. And then on the 4th day, they understand dead is dead. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. Well, were they really there to console Mary and Martha? Or were they there thinking Lazarus was a very good friend of Jesus? Was Jesus going to show his face, to come back for his friend's funeral? When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. While Mary stayed at home, Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Now hear these next words in the most gentlest way that can be read because I believe this is how Jesus spoke to Martha, not with words of any condemnation for her about the accusation she just made at him. And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this? And she said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." Now, at the end of the message today, we will sing the hymn, "I Am the Bread of Life." It's well known that is, if it was my birthday this weekend, this is the hymn I would have invited the congregation to sing. And the reason we are singing it today, though, is these are the words of Martha. When we read when we sing verses 4 and 5 of the "I Am the Bread of Life," this is where it comes from, Martha's words. Jesus weeps. When Martha had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. As I read these next sentences, I invite you to note how many times weeping is mentioned. They followed her because she thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. Jesus said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Remember last week's sermon. Only those from God can open the eyes of the blind. Jesus raises Lazarus to life. Then Jesus, again, greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, there is a stench already because he has been dead for 4 days." And we did have a little bit of a chocolate council meeting this Thursday night because the King James Version is so much better. It says, "He may stinketh." But Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you," again, hear this most gently, "that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upwards and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." This is what's going to get Jesus killed. The raising of Lazarus. plot to kill Jesus. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what he had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the council and said, "What are we to do? This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. You do not understand that it is better for you to have one man die for the people than to have the whole nation destroyed." Oh, the irony of what Caiaphas just said. He did not say this on his own, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was about to die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but to gather into one the dispersed children of God. So from that day on, they planned to put Jesus to death. The gospel of our Lord. Grace and peace be from God our Creator, from Jesus Christ, God's only Son. Amen. So I'm sure, for sure, those of you who were able to come to Wednesday's midweek service we held here, which was March 25th, that was Peace Lutheran's actual 53rd anniversary of the first date we worshiped in this building. Back in 1970, March 25th was Palm Sunday. March 25th. And also, March 25th was a Sunday 3 years ago. And that was the first Sunday of the lockdown, when we were no longer able to meet as a church. We just had our last Fish Friday, and we were going into spring break, and word came up, even as we were at our Friday Fish Fry and serving that school was not going to be held the next week. Don't come back after spring break. And at that time, didn't we actually kind of believe that kids were happy? We're just kind of going into an extended break. And none of us knew or understood the long winter of COVID that we were about to enter. It wasn't a blizzard. It was a long winter. And as COVID started playing out, the fear, you could only have 8 people in this building, any building. And people were dying alone in hospitals, whether from COVID or from surgeries that had been held up or just in their own natural process of dying. No visitors allowed. Nurses holding iPads to say goodbye to their loved one. The body remembers that collective trauma we all went through. I believe that with my whole heart and soul. 3 years later, that there is trauma from this COVID. And there is trauma whether we personally lost a loved one or not during COVID. If you had been there, my brother would not have died. It is such an honest statement of fact, lament, even accusation. So honest, even though then in that moment, the way that Jesus answers back to Martha. And again, hear this in the most gentle possible way. Your brother will rise again. I am the resurrection and life. Everyone who believes in me will not die. But what's really interesting in looking at this passage of John is that Jesus does raise Lazarus back to life, but that takes up 2 verses, what, the 48 some verses we just read, it only takes 2 verses. But look at all of the verses we read that were given to expressions of grief and talking about weeping. Especially now on this last Sunday of Lent as we are getting and preparing for Holy Week. Why does Jesus weep? Jan asked me that this morning. Jesus weeps for Lazarus. He's lost his good friend. Jesus weeps for Mary and Martha, his dear friends, and their loss. But the next chapter, we did have to flip the page this morning. Chapter 12, Jesus will enter Jerusalem. Jesus weeps for himself. He knows what's ahead. And that is what has to be. For Jesus to call Lazarus out of the tomb means it is for Jesus to now enter the tomb. He is invited into his own tomb, and he weeps. When Jesus weeps, he is fully aware of what death does. He weeps for himself also because he cannot take death away. To be human is to have a 100% chance of dying. Jesus weeps. And what death does take away is present in his tears. What he's experiencing in that moment and what is to come, and also knowing that he can't take it away. And Jesus' tears are for us as well. Jesus can't take them away. Jesus can't take our pain away. Jesus can't take away our grief and our loss. And he knows it. And there is something deeply comforting in that. And it is symbolic that on our tomb, that we must understand the Trinity is together, and the linen cloths for death are the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And the 4th linen wrap is yours, ours. And I believe that when Jesus is weeping again, there is something deeply comforting in that. And his knowing is not dismissive of us. And that's what he does for Mary. Mary, kneeling at his feet, my brother would not have died if you had been here. His grief is publicly on display. He didn't go away to be alone. He didn't go off by himself. Everybody got to see his grief. Jesus wept. And I invite you just to look at your bulletin cover and depicting Jesus weeping there in his face. It's not just a single tear that is streaming down his face. Jesus weeps. Jesus weeps, that verb is for tears streaming down your face. The other weepings that you read are just, if you could see it in the original Greek, are just words for lament, crying. Only Jesus was given that verb of the weep, of tears streaming down his face. When Jesus saw again Mary weeping, it says he was greatly disturbed in spirit. I've never been around horses, but that verb for he was greatly disturbed in spirit is for when a horse snorts. I don't know, I can't draw a connection to that. But when a horse snorts, they say its whole body shudders. The whole body just shudders. When a horse snorts, its whole body shakes with emotion. And so, in that verb, it's telling us that Jesus' whole body shook or shuddered with emotion. And if you have experienced grief, and all of us are going to experience grief in this life, when you first get the news of the death, and you're in full-blown grief, does not your whole body shake with sorrow when you first get that news? And as your grief continues to play out. And I believe that in that grief of Jesus snorting like a horse, it is anger at death itself, and Jesus cannot stop death. And it makes so much sense. The person, again, in the throes of grief, and you're shaking. And then Jesus asked where they laid Lazarus. And then outside the tomb, it says again that Jesus was again greatly disturbed. This makes so much sense to me. Now that I've been here almost 9 years and been through many funerals, there is the grief when you first hear of the loss. And then there's the grief the first time when you walk into the funeral home and you realize you're doing that final planning for that person. And then there's the grief when you come back to the funeral home, if there's a visitation, and you see the casket and the body for the first time or the urn. And the next big moment of grief that really hits in that time, if you've met with other loved ones, the first time you see them. And then the next moment of grief that hits you is when you come into this church building and the casket is there or the urn. That first time you come into the building. All of those moments are that hit you. And then there's the moment, I can just see this in families as it plays out, and then there's the moment when the casket comes forward, or the urn. And then there's the moment when the casket is let out and you put it in the hearse. It's another moment when it just hits you. And then there's the moment when you go to the cemetery and place the casket or urn in the ground. All of those deep moments of grief that are going to hit. Jesus understands those moments. So I'll just end with this today. That shout that Jesus does, Lazarus, come out. That meaning is reserved, its real meaning, for those who are with him as he weeps. Why does Jesus weep? The Lazarus story will continue next week for Palm Sunday. Amen. I invite you to sing hymn 485. that we sing verses 4 and 5. Those are the words of Martha, verses 4 and 5. But Jan, as our clavinova player, has insisted that we sing all 5 verses. So we're going to sing all 5 verses. And as you're looking at this hymn, we have sung it a fair amount of times in this congregation. And it's actually not an easy hymn to sing. So, for those of you who read music, you'll notice that in the different verses, the music notes line up on different words. And that, if you're not able to read music, can kind of mess with you in singing this hymn. But what Jan has done, as she has made her own crazy way of playing it, she came up with this all on her own. And she has done it such that if you are singing the word, it's the note you're supposed to be singing. So what she's actually doing is playing the melody of what you're supposed to sing. So it'll be much easier to sing, and I'm very confident this will work. to remain standing for the prayers. I will never forget one Easter Sunday morning as we were singing that for communion. And Betty came up and we sang it to each other as I gave her communion. I'll never forget that moment. For the prayers of the people today, for our online congregation, I will say, yes, Lord, and I invite you to respond with, we believe that you are the Christ. Yes, Lord, we believe that you are the Christ. Almighty God, who called his Son into ministry by the baptism of the Holy Spirit and testified that he was the coming King, through the good news culminating on the cross, hear our prayers today of thanksgiving. You are the God of angel armies, which we must imagine the angel armies looked like the northern lights we saw earlier this week. The God who is triumphant over sin, healing those who were in its clutches. Yes, Lord. You are the God of life, the God who is and will be and is triumphant over death. Hearing the prayer of your Son to pull Lazarus from its grip and give him new life. Yes, Lord. We thank you that you, who were greeted with praise at your entry into Jerusalem, would humble yourself in death and enter a tomb for us. Yes, Lord.
We believe that you are the Christ.
You redeem the world and its peoples. Free us from systems of oppression, which all lead to death. Unbind nations and societies from the sins of racism, sexism, and homophobia and all isms. Raise up leaders at all levels of government who work to promote the dignity of every human life. Yes, Lord.
We believe that you are the Christ.
You weep when we weep. Be present with those who grieve, or who are troubled by illness, and those we now name silently in our hearts. You hear us when we call to you. Deliver us from the depths of our despair, and free us from the worries that bind us. Yes, Lord.
We believe that you are the Christ.
You are the resurrection and the life. Even though we die, we will live. With thanksgiving, we remember all your saints who now live in your eternal love. Yes, Lord. We believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who have come into the world. We believe that you will raise us up on the last day. Amen. And how our song all ended together, Jen, we could have not made that up. Amen. I invite you to share the love and peace with one another. Peace of the Lord be with you. Be well in Christ. You may be seated. We continue now with the great Thanksgiving and Holy Communion. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right to give our thanks and praise.
It is indeed right, our duty and our joy, that we should at all times and in all places give thanks and praise to you, Almighty, merciful God, through our Savior Jesus Christ. You call your angels, your people, to cleanse their hearts and prepare with joy for the Paschal feast, that renewed in the gift of baptism we may come to the fullness of your grace. And so the cherubim and the seraphim, with all the choirs of angels, with the church on earth, with the multitude of hosts of heaven, we praise your name and join their unending hymn.
You are indeed holy and mighty, merciful God. You are most holy, and great is the majesty of your glory. You so loved the world that you gave your only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish but have eternal life. We give you thanks for Jesus coming into the world to fulfill for us your holy will and to accomplish all things for our salvation. The night in which he was betrayed, our Lord Jesus took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body given for you. Do this for the remembrance of me." Again, after supper, he took the cup, gave thanks, and gave it for all to drink, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, shed for you for all people for the forgiveness of sin. Do this for the remembrance of me." Lord, remember us in your kingdom, and let us pray the prayer you taught us. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
when we eat this bread, we share the body of Christ. We believe. body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ strengthen you and preserve you in eternal life. Receive the benediction. May the love of God pursue you, the light of Christ enfold you, and you dwell in the house of the Lord your whole life long. And bless us in the Lent we actually have. Our sending song is hymn 611, I Heard the Voice of Jesus Say. I invite you for your bulletins, Psalm 130. This Psalm 130, Jesus wept. We can almost hear the strains from verse number 1. Out of the depths I cried to you, O Lord.
Lord, hear my voice.
No, I didn't want you to join in just yet, I'm sorry. Jesus wept. Out of the depths I cried to you, O Lord, would have been on Jesus' lips. And what's really interesting about this Psalm 130, and I didn't know this, it can be used for a blessing if you get new bells. If you install new church bells, Psalm 130 is recited. And I'm wondering out loud now for a new tradition that maybe we should start for this church. We do have bells outside, and that moment when the hearse leaves, not when the hearse leaves, but that moment when the casket leaves the narthex, and when it's being placed into the hearse, that we should then ring the bells. And we told those bells outside to signify that body now is passing through death into life. That is our belief. Flip it over. So there in verses 5 and 6, the repetition of, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits for the Lord. Waiting and watching is hard work.
It goes better when we have fellow watchers. But we must again put on Mary and Martha's, why should we have to wait? My brother would not have died if you'd been here. It's never explained. And it's okay to feel cheated like Mary and Martha. And we shouldn't rush to the promise. This says no in this psalm, but it is the promise which enables us to wait on the faithfulness of God. I'm crying to the depths of my heart. It's not just saying, yeah, I'm just going to keep going on. I'm just going to trust. No. Honest lament is welcome. But it is lament with hope. And when the promise is realized, it's all that much better and we appreciate it. And yes, we weep, but not as those without hope. I invite you now to recite Psalm 130 with me. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord.
Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications.
If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand?
But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered.
I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope.
My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for the morning.
More than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, there is hesed, and with him is great power to redeem.
It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities.
Marked with the cross of Christ, go forth in love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
As we go into waiting period now, as we get ready to enter the Holy Week of Palm Sunday in the next week, we move together into this waiting period. Amen.